I'm interested in living completely fearlessly. I want to live no fear. And so when I have a fear, I just want to find her and I want to kiss her and I want to say, we don't have to be afraid. Let's go and live. That's how I feel about fear. I want to identify all the corners of fear and say, I'm interested in freedom. My fear is the antidote of freedom, and I optimize for joy and freedom. So I don't want to be afraid. Of course, fear motivates us. 100% has it motivated me in the past? Absolutely. But I feel there's a way bigger opportunity when we're fearless. I do feel like, let's go, inner child. Hop on my fucking shoulders. I got you. Nothing to be afraid of. Wow. I have learned from movement really different things that were originally taught to me. I've learned about confidence in the body. I've learned about health. I've learned about showing up. I've learned about discipline, self-love, leaning into your own mind and noticing how your mental health can actually propel you forward, oftentimes far more than your actual physical strength can.
So you talk about being confident and focused and disciplined and being in your body in terms of connection to movement and all these different sports that you've done. But when did you develop the understanding and connection that the movement is really about feeling good, feeling focused and disciplined?
I think I understood that movement was a sincere source of personal power because I was feeling imposter syndrome when I went to Harvard, which could be translated as the voices in my head saying, you only got in because XYZ. You're the diversity check mark. You're this, you're that. You didn't really deserve it. These kinds of feelings. When I would see these runners on the Charles River, I said, listen, 5 miles is 5 miles. You know way to slice it. If you ran it, you ran it. It's an honest accomplishment. And I was really drawn to the rawness of it, the honesty. If you get up at 6 in the morning and you run in the snow, there's no like, oh, but somebody helped you. Like you just got up and you did that. You walk in the world differently. It's raw. You don't need to come from privilege. You don't need to have the best clothing. You don't have to have spoken a certain way, whatever people think. I respected the integrity of sports. That's what it was for me.
Okay, so your journey from childhood sport went on an evolution, basically, and arrived at the marathon, would you say?
Absolutely. And now our boxing.
And now boxing. So just to give me a little bit more context, what was movement like before college? As a kid, were you very energetic? Were you very active? Did you like to try lots of different things? Or, what did that look like for you?
I was not particularly overly energized. I wasn't like a kid who, there's lots of kids who have lots of energy. You almost have to like run them around before you put them to bed, that kind of thing. Wasn't that. But I wasn't particularly lazy. I was like a skinny kid, active movement. But I have no particular memory of being encouraged to move necessarily, nor do I have any memories of like highly intense, rigorous sports as a kid. It just had this kind of gentle in between. And to be honest, I feel that way now. I like to push myself in sports because I learned valuable lessons, but I notice that if I'm on my default setting, I naturally am very adventurous. I dance on my stage when I'm singing. I like to stretch my body if I feel I'm sore off a flight. It feels quite intuitive to me now. It doesn't feel like I have to like push and like kill myself and crush it and like, no days off. Like that's never really been my motivation. But a gentle amount of movement, meditation, these kinds of things daily, that tends to be where I sort of naturally operate.
We have a running joke in terms of when we're out in the world and I see different sports. I'm like, hey, have you done that? And you're like, well, yeah, I was like head of the team or I know how to play squash. I don't think I've met anybody who has had such a diverse background in terms of movement. So what does all of those different types of movement, how does that contribute to where you're at now in terms of how you move in the world?
Skills are very empowering. Skills are empowering, undeniably so. Exposure is empowering. Being on the golf course with my father and a bunch of older men and being able to feel quite comfortable in that setting. Being in the old squash courts again with a lot of high-powered individuals and feeling comfortable in that setting. Being loud and vocal on the volleyball court. Volleyball is highly communicative. You have to operate as one amoeba. Obviously, boxing takes enormous amounts of commitment, rigor. The more exposure you have, You learn different things from different sports. You feel like you have different skills, the ability to move your body. I love yoga. I love CrossFit. I love lifting, I love boxing, I love running, snowboarding. In this phase of my life at 35, it's the individual sports that of high value to me.
Okay, and so in terms of how that relates to your emotions and how you connect the movement when you're trying to shift emotion or when you're trying to process stuff, how important is movement in connecting with your emotions, and what does that do for you? What does that look like for you?
I mean, of course, you've answered the question just by asking it. Movement is vital for mental health. And I think for me, I've actually learned over the years to have many arsenals in my toolkit. So being able to know how to hold a yin yoga posture, it means that you can hold a deeply challenging, flexible pose that's really working out the emotional trauma in the fascia. People think of it as like candlelight, peaceful yoga, but to sit in a bind where you're stretching out the pain in your hips, in your knees, in your thighs, in the back of your legs, the back, where all of the emotional trauma is, this is way more effective than any therapy or medicine, but it takes enormous amounts of grit and discipline, trust. This is profound, but it's the medicine we need that keeps us walking until we're 90, 100, all these different things. When I need to move anger, you've taught me this idea that emotions, especially the deeper ones over time, become calcified. And so therefore more rigorous movement is needed to sort of chip away at those hardened emotions. This was a really vital thing that you taught me and made me aware of, because I'm not naturally drawn to hit or high intensity interval training, boxing. It's very hard for me, which is why I know there's something there for me. Every time I finish a boxing class and I'm like tired out and I've left it all in the ring, it's a really profound feeling. You do feel free of something. You feel like, wow. Similarly, how people do enormous breath work and all of the tears come and you can release and you're like, wow, I feel light. I was carrying all these stones in my back. So in this way, from the simplest gamut, not simplest, but let's say most gentle gamut of yin yoga to the most extreme of high intensity interval training, I have learned that all these different movement practices are mental health tools.
I have a theory around trauma that we've discussed before, and the idea is that it lives in the body. It's not just a theory, it's supported by a lot of data, and that when we move or have a level of high intensity movement, exactly that, the emotions or the trauma is calcified in the body. And what this movement does is that it shifts and moves that and allows it to come out. So therefore releasing the person of the effect of this trauma in some way, which is a huge part of why I want to share stories of triumph over trauma, because I think it's really important, and showing the connection of movement and how it does that. So I do have this theory that I believe that we're all walking around with a degree of trauma, carrying trauma. And I wanted to know your thoughts on this. Do you think we're all walking around traumatized, or there's something that we're carrying? And what does that look like for you?
I think we're all carrying different experiences that have caused us pain, and it's not a bad thing. It's our pain is our greatest freedom. Every pain that I've been brave enough to work through, I feel like a superhero on the other side. Even cleaning up and letting go fully of alcohol years ago during the pandemic, letting go of coffee, eating plant-based, like these things also support the movements that I'm trying to optimize for. When I eat clean, it's a yoga diet. Your channels, your temple are clear and clean to be able to do the kind of healing that you're wanting for yourself.
How did you arrive at that though? How did you arrive at the point where I'm like, I need to do things differently?
First of all, I noticed on the simplest example, when I feel a little jealous of somebody else, I pay attention. No, you don't drink alcohol. We're all here like idiots drinking this free alcohol, and you're here like a ninja saying, no, I want to be like you. How are you moving in the industry like a big boss? All of us are numbing ourselves, and you out here seeing what's what and leaving early. Wow. I want to be like you. I like how you move. When I see you get up early in the morning, you running, you don't miss a day, I respect that. Wow. Like, I want to move like that. Some days I get up early, some days I don't, musician style. You walk differently if you're like, nope, this is a non-negotiable. Wow. That's just you on your own walking through the planet being this way, like a ninja. Aspirational. Wow. So I notice when I'm like, that's fire. That's real quiet leadership. That's that person respects themselves and believes in their own power enough to protect it. Wow. So that's interesting to me. It's important to me. It's powerful to me. I like to move with self respect because then I have something to offer. And when I move my body and I'm like strong and I look good in clothing and I feel like my body can lift things in the plane or help other people or I can stretch, or when I have illness in my body and I'm aware of them, all of these different things allow my own journey inward to be rich, profound, and that also allows my journey outward to be of service.
It's also about seeing what's possible from others' example. Would you say that also inspires and motivates you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think so many of us right now are focused and distracted by aesthetics. Instagram is all about aesthetics. Here's the aesthetics of my abs. Here's the aesthetics of my arms. Here's the aesthetics of this 20-second Pilates workout that got me ripped in 30 seconds. Click here and join my course and now waste your money for something that's fake. Like they're selling us so much garbage. And I'm interested in depth. I'm interested in the real deal. And I know what grit it takes. I've run 6 marathons. Like I know how much work it takes to actually show up daily. I watch you do it. It takes an enormous amount of self-respect and work. When I practice those things in my movement practice, then when I'm on a stage confidently speaking about something, I can be my own champion and my own boss and my own cheerleader rather than seeking the external affirmation of somebody else.
Yeah, I see that. I think a huge part of Fight Forward is storytelling. And there's this really powerful image of you crossing the London Marathon with your arms up, like colored leggings, like, yes, and then period blood in between the middle of your legs. Like, powerful, super powerful. Can you explain and talk us through that moment?
In my year of training when I was going to Harvard Business School, I anytime I had my period, I would just take a break. I would just chill out. And so when I got to the London Marathon and I realized I was about to be on day one of my period, like many of us who have been caught unprepared on our cycles, I just started evaluating my options. I was like, oh gosh, like I don't have a pad and that wouldn't be comfortable for 4 hours of running. I didn't have a menstrual cup on me at the time. And of course, a tampon, maybe. I didn't have one on me. And I also was like, I don't want like a half in, half out situation while I'm trying to run. It didn't seem comfortable. And honestly, I did have a little superstition around like, I've never run with those products for that long of a time. They don't seem appropriate for the job that I have to do. And right now, my job is to run this marathon in the best way I know how with all of my tools. And so I, of course, knew it was like radical and badass to just choose to bleed freely, which I absolutely leaned into. I was like, this is punk rock. Bleeding from anywhere running a marathon is badass. Like, this is dope. And I knew there was enormous amounts of privilege in that choice. I knew that I was free to run in the way that was best for me and my body, and I absolutely leaned into that. I also knew, how are you going to shame a marathoner? Why don't you come run 26 miles, 42 kilometers, bleeding from anywhere, and then we can have a conversation? Like I knew there was power in this particular choice. I didn't know how it would play out, but it was intuitively guided, and I was ultimately problem solving for myself. I didn't feel like my choice had any negative ramifications on anybody else, so it felt badass. And the more I ran, the more I thought like, wow, women and children and girls and people who bleed all around this world don't have that same privilege. And that actually stigma, which is the inability to talk comfortably and confidently about our own bodies, is one of the most effective forms of oppression because it's denying us the ability to talk comfortably and confidently about our own bodies. And so the more I ran, the more I felt motivated. I passed my dad and brother, and I actually did take my breast cancer care jersey and cover my body a little bit. I wanted them to still feel like they could be cheering for me and not feel embarrassed. That's how deep the trauma, stigma, and embarrassment runs around menstruation, that we're embarrassed that somebody else might be associated with the person who has a period, such that we want to protect them. But actually, it should be quite the opposite. We should be all cheering each other. And so when I crossed the finish line, I wrote about the experience, and that's when the story went viral.
What do you think it done for the world in terms of the impact it had?
At that time, especially in the United States, we had Hillary Clinton running against Donald Trump for the presidency. We had Donald Trump insulting women's periods. We had Ruby Kaur had just gone viral for having Instagram taking down an image of her bleeding. And so there was an enormous, undercurrent of awareness around this topic. And the marathon story just really blew the lid open around this topic that was waiting to come out. And for me, it was always rooted in love. It's rooted in common sense. It's rooted in personal power. I felt proud of myself crossing that marathon, which is why it gave me the bravery that was required to face the internet. The internet is a crazy place. The kinds of messages that I would get were out of control. You know, obviously it was a very polarizing subject. On the one hand, people are like, wow, this is our hero. On the other hand, people are like, this is so disgusting. There's other, like, this is not even an issue. There's other problems to be solved, you know, that kind of thing. To this day, the word, you know, period, menstrual health, menstruation has been Googled exponentially far more since ever before 2015. The amount of innovation that I've seen in the space where a lot of women and queer and gender nonconforming and trans owned businesses are really stepping up to solve these problems for our own bodies in a way that we've never seen before because the stigmatization prevented the innovation that was required. A lot of people are being diagnosed and treated a lot more accurately for endometriosis and other reproductive health related issues. What also interests me and motivates me is a lot of work that I did in downtown LA around incarcerated women and people who are unhoused and making sure that our most vulnerable populations still receive dignified care.
It's pretty powerful. I think the legacy is far reaching. And even just in terms of my own boxing experience and having to, you know, be on your period whilst boxing, like you can put up to seven pounds on when you're due on, and boxing is a weighted sport. So, you know, that in itself has huge implications, but just even to be able to talk about it and discuss it and have that considered as perhaps, you know, something in terms of competition criteria is huge. And I think it's really powerful that you were able to get the conversation going or at least started.
You know, one thing I'll share with you before we go to whatever else you have planned is that in this phase of my life, almost 10 years now since the marathon story went viral, there's two really profound things that I've learned from my own relationship to my own period. One is just being dialed in with the moon. You know, it's an opportunity that we don't provide ourselves with often enough. The fact that we bleed and our cycles are oftentimes connected with the moon is such a powerful reset. It's such a opportunity for us to notice how our emotions doing, how are we doing, what are the things that I'm releasing this cycle and what am I calling in. It's a really beautiful ritual that we should all be stepping into. And the second thing that I've learned is conscious management of my emotions at every phase of my cycle. Especially in our dynamic, I feel very grateful for the openness with which we address each other and the safety with which we can own the vulnerable times on our cycle. You know when I'm feeling moody, when I'm feeling just stretched bandwidth. You know when I'm feeling myself, feeling charismatic, feeling confident, feeling sexy. You know when I'm feeling sad, my confidence is low, my energy is low. I don't feel like I'm doing the most high energy sports that day. So when we can own it and share it in a way that we know won't be used against us, like has so often been used against women in the patriarchal context, there's a really huge opportunity for global empowerment of anybody who bleeds.
I think it's bringing conversations to the forefront. It's really quite magical.
Own your voice.
Own your voice.
Own your voice. Don't be afraid.
That's it. Song lyrics.
Own your voice. Don't be afraid.
Absolutely. And that's just the tiniest tip of your movement iceberg, really, to be honest. You do yoga. You're like a qualified yoga teacher. You're now an accomplished boxer, I'd like to say, on the journey. And so we met through Adidas and I was coaching you. Why boxing at that point? You were really into boxing and you were just, if I remember rightly, on the beginning of your journey. But why boxing for you?
Boxing is the hardest. That's why. It's the hardest. It's my default. And I don't feel like I can fully do it alone just yet. I definitely respect and I admire the way you hold the container, the way you show up.
Okay, so just to add context, so you are now part of a cohort of 10 women who are training for the very first time to step into the ring. It's a 12-week program, 8 sessions a week. You've been pretty much showing up for most of those. You've been on and off boxing over the last few years, but definitely your boxing now, we were discussing your boxing when I first met you. on the set of Adidas to now is completely different. And I don't think it's the training. I think it's the person, it's the mindset, it's the mentality and the personal growth that you have experienced from then to now. Truly.
You know, I want to always give you the credit. You know, it's also because you're the best boxing coach ever, and I love you so dearly. There's that. I also think I had to shift something because I grew up in a highly competitive environment. When you feel afraid that your self worth and your ability to deserve love is tied to your performance, there's no way you can be present. Impossible to be present. Now you're fearing. It's either I'm about to have the best day of my life or I'm going to be having the worst day of my life. So this is the reason why so many of us have such a tough time in so many of these sports. Our whole self-worth is tied to the egoic up and down of self-worth expansion, contractions, but that's all a lie. And actually, as long as we don't value ourselves, society always has something to sell us. You know, it's actually a huge opportunity for exploitation. The shift that I made this year, this last year, I would say, how much love can I give to the thing? How much great, sincere, childlike devotion and humility can I give to the thing? When I get punched in the face, like, oh, thank you for teaching me something I didn't know today. And when I step into the ring and I do well, it's like, yeah, good. I've given my focus and my discipline to the job at hand and I've executed the job, and that's it. It's just the isness of the thing. And that has freed me from a lot of my own negative self rhetoric and fear. The other thing I'll say about that as well that I've learned from performance, when I'm relaxed in my relationship, on my stage, in my boxing, relaxation allows being present. When you are present, your wisdom can acutely guide you for what is needed, and ultimately you can give your love. When I'm not relaxed, because I'm not present, because I'm tied to the outcome, there's no love there. There's fear-based. So this is the shift that I've made that has allowed me to just surrender to my love for the sport of boxing and the humility to get my ass kicked.
Yeah. There's two things you've mentioned there. Number one is being relaxed. So the irony is, as you step into the ring, it's like the most unrelaxing place to be. It's really challenging. You know, someone's trying to punch you. It can be quite stressful. But what I'm also really focused on teaching people is the ability to relax and exactly that, connect with what you're doing in the present moment. So the more relaxed you are, the more powerful you are, because you're not tense. You're not like squeezed and ready for like fear, waiting for the shot. You're more relaxed, you're more powerful, your punches are strong and long. So there's something really quite profound. I always say boxing is life, but there is definitely something quite profound about the idea of being relaxed in such an what looks like an outwardly stressful environment. I think that's quite powerful, and I really love to share that with the people that I'm training. The second thing you spoke about was fear. So I think fear is healthy. I absolutely think fear is healthy, and I've been working on this with the group of women that I'm training for this event. And the idea is that fear can be one of two things. It can either drive you forwards or it can hold you back. And so the idea is choice. So I still get fearful when I'm stepping into the ring. It doesn't happen often these days when I'm sparring, but I still have that healthy dose of fear and nerves. And so I want to ask you, how do you feel? What tools do you use in your arsenal when you're stepping in a boxing context, or even in any situation where you're feeling maybe emotionally challenged or fearful? What?
I'm interested in living completely fearlessly.
Okay, nice.
I want to live no fear. And so when I have a fear, I just want to find her and I want to kiss her and I want to say, we don't have to be afraid. Let's go and live.
Okay, nice.
That's how I feel about fear. I want to identify all the corners of fear and say, I'm interested in freedom. My fear is the antidote of freedom, and I optimize for joy and freedom. So I don't want to be afraid. I hear what you're saying. Of course, fear motivates us. 100% has it motivated me in the past? Absolutely. But I feel there's a way bigger opportunity when we're fearless. That's what gets me high. I do feel like, let's go, inner child. Hop on my fucking shoulders. I got you. Nothing to be afraid of. Wow. Freedom.
Okay. So no fear. Fearlessness is just the idea of stepping in with great bravery and love for whatever it is that you're doing.
The thing is that I don't mind getting hit. Now I understand, like, you're like, look at me like, Kieran, you've not been properly clocked. Okay, you've not been knocked out yet. So it's true. Let's see what I have to say about that day. But the truth is that I don't mind getting hit. I'd rather learn the lessons myself firsthand. I don't mind making mistakes because then I really learn the pain of the lesson. I don't like when other people tell me their experience and try to warn me. Of course, a little bit anecdotally, we all learn from the collective experience, but for the most part in my life, I've always enjoyed having my own relationship to the thing. So it's really profound when I listen to you mention the metaphor of stepping into the ring because I'm not interested in watching. I'm interested in, like, you told me to keep my hands up and then I let them down and then I got punched. Okay, it's one thing when you told me that was going to happen. It's another thing when I feel a blast of a punch in my face, and I really understand how important it is that we train with weights in our hands to practice keeping the guard up, right? Like, that's depth, that's quality of life, that's interesting. That's, I have a bruise on my face because I showed up. Wow.
That's what I love about boxing, though, is exactly that, the stepping into the ring and just the humbling nature of it,
Yes.
that there is no hiding, that
Yes.
there's only lessons to be learned, and that what you're feeling is for you. It's your lessons in the ring. There's nobody else. I mean, you can have a team of people around you, have your coaches, you have the support of other teammates that you train with, but essentially when you step into the ring, the lessons are yours to learn, nobody else's.
Yeah. Like, this whole thing of, like, oh, but what if you lose? Like, I'm telling you, I just don't perceive it that way because you stepped into the ring, like, ultimate respect. Like, I felt that way about the marathon. I was like, dude, even if I, like, take a Uber home at mile 17, I just ran 17 miles. Like, I just crushed it more than half the planet at minimum. Like, I just stepped into the ring as a boxer. Like, who does that? Like, the context of win and lose is just, it's a construct.
I think in boxing, especially, of course, you know, the end result is winning, but the journey in terms of boxing is so powerful. I mean, my very first fight I lost, and it was the biggest lesson. I learned everything aside from my shorts being too tight and that I needed a little more training in terms of fitness. I learned everything I needed to know to go on and win. So we do have a saying in boxing: it's only a loss if you don't learn from it.
You know, I respect you for starting so young. Like, I know you didn't start like at 15, you started in your early 20s, but I do respect that because as I listen to you speak about the emotional intelligence required as a boxer and level of maturity, I actually don't think I would have been as mature on my journey. I feel grateful that boxing is in my life in this phase of my life where I can appreciate the beauty of getting hit that day or the discipline that is required to not have gone out the night before and get up early and have energy for the training, that kind of thing. I think 10 years ago, I would have felt quite bullied and sad to get beat up. And it would have been a little bit probably early in my journey.
I think probably the last 10 years, you know, going through my own personal experience with abuse and just also motherhood and so many different challenges, I feel like I've connected the dots now in my wise mind of at the time when I was competing at a high level, I was very much in it. It was very physical. So the learning or the downloads didn't really come until later on where I had the, you know, it was like muscle memory or boxing memory was in me. And then I was able to make the connections when I was drawing on that as tools to, you know, the resilience, the mentality to keep going, to not give up. These are all things that I drew on as a result of my own trauma, you know, rearing its head. So at the time, it was very much I was just in it as boxing. So I think, you know, 10 years ago, I wasn't able to make that connection, and now I really see how actually it is. The lessons are mental. It's they say that in boxing it's 80% mental, the rest is physical. But actually, the downloads of that, there is so much to learn. Whether you step into the ring or not, there's so much to learn about the movement of boxing and how it can relate to your day-to-day life. So what would be the one thing that sticks out to you in terms of how boxing for you on this experience relates to your day-to-day life?
I think it's consistency. I do think that I'm consistent, but I enjoy diversity in my day, you know, doing different things. And so it's actually quite a challenge for me to commit to one sport and show up every day for that sport. And every time I have done that in my life, whether it's a degree, marathon training, in our case now the fight back, at the end of it, I'm always so proud of myself because that's something that I actually needed help and like a container and like a support with. When I'm left to my own devices, I love freshness in the day. I love different things, you know, and I love freedom. I'm always optimizing for freedom. And of course, there's great discipline, as we know, in there's great freedom in discipline. So that's what it is. It's the consistency for me that I'm benefiting from.
Do you know how I got into boxing was for that reason. I didn't like consistency in that respect. I didn't like the idea of just going to the gym or doing, picking a sport and doing it over and over again.
There's purpose here as well because every day I can train and go to CrossFit and do pull-ups so that my arms look good on Instagram. But I think it's a different thing when you're training to be safe in the ring for a sports event. Like you're training for a specific purpose with a time, a finished time. Like you have to be ready. That's very motivating. You know what I think of you as well? I think of when I first met you, and I always tell you this, I had a big crush on you.
You say that.
Big
I didn't sense it. I thought we just really got on and we just like that. I was just fascinated by your
Well, the
whole
thing is,
man.
I'm sure because you're so beautiful, people come on really strong. So I had to just make sure that I kept it appropriate. But for you, you walk with a certain level of confidence and you use your confidence to uplift, encourage, motivate those around you, make others feel included, safe, seen. And I think that's one of your superpowers. And I'm drawn to it. And I'm very, very drawn to people because it's quite a rare duality where the person is very, very confident because they're investing in their own light and they're actually taking care of themselves at a high level. So they have enormous amounts of self-worth. At the same time, they're not using that to walk around with a high ego inapproachably. They're quite the opposite. Because they're in service of themselves, they have something to give. They say, now let me take you along for the journey. Let me uplift you as well with my light. This is real leadership, and this is a very rare quality. And I think beyond my crush on you, I was really drawn to that very beautiful characteristic within you.
Thank you. I think when I hear you say that, I also think, well, I like that heals me also. So the thing is, even though, of course, it's in service of, uplifting and supporting and helping other people, but also, I don't know if it's like a selfish element, but actually in doing so, I'm actually healing myself because at times I haven't felt it for myself. I haven't had the resources or the, I guess that the lens turned inwards to give myself the care that I needed in order to push through or get through. By doing it for others, it then energizes me and heals me so that I'm like, this is what you also need. I guess it's reciprocal as well. And maybe people don't even realize they're doing that. Even just this program, the Fight Back and working with these women and training them, there's a huge benefit in terms of my own journey and healing of just being in this safe container of women who have an understanding of each other's hard challenges and experiences and love and care, but then also the grit and authenticity of showing up for training and stepping into the ring. Like that's my perfect dynamic of just care and love and support, but then also freedom to absolutely express the fire.
You are walking in your purpose. You're walking in your purpose. And really, that's the global opportunity, isn't it? If every one of us were so brave as to prioritize our healing journey, therein lies your essential contribution and the very medicine that you now can offer others. Wow.
It's a journey. As we say, we're on the journey. We're on the journey. So words of wisdom. Madame Gandhi's words of wisdom for triumph over trauma. Or actually, if you could give yourself, the younger baby madam, if the person who used sports as a tool to kind of achieve, what would you say to your younger self in terms of how to navigate? Would you say, is there anything that you would say even?
I would not say anything to my younger self. I would say everything to everybody else around her, and I would tell them to shut up.
Best answer. Everybody else be quiet. That's it. She's fine. She's great, in fact. You just keep your mouth shut. That's it. Okay. Thank you. So, final words of wisdom for your fight night experience. How do you see that panning out? How's the process so far for you leading up to the fight, and how do you think you're going to manage on the night?
Leslie, I love boxing. I love it. I just think it's fabulous. It's just so hilarious. We just like hilariously beating each other up. It's like what an absurd behavioral choice.
There's so much going into that, though, isn't it funny? Because it does look like, oh, people are just beating each other up. That was my misconception. I don't know how you felt in there, but it is a game of strategy and a real thinking person's sport as well. So
I love looking for the openings. For some reason, I feel like we're on the same team, so I'm kind of like, oh, like, good job. Like, I feel motivated for them. And when they land like a proper one, then I always feel proud of myself for the way I recover. That's the other thing. So like my own like mental like conversation is like, oh, good job. Like you're really like back, like rocking for more. Like cool, you know? And I also like just being unfazed. Like it's like interesting to me to like just get hella punched and just be like, good job, nice shot. Here I am. Now I'm gonna do the same to you. Better watch out. I'm not going anywhere. Not today. It's just like it's like life. These people send me rude emails all the time. It's like no problem. I'm still here shining.
how do you feel when you land a shot? How does that feel for
Oh,
you?
it feels. I love landing a shot. It feels fabulous. And as soon as I land one, I'm like, oh, pop, get some more in,
Quick.
quick.
It's a good feeling. Did you expect to feel good landing a shot? This is interesting because I have mixed experiences of people on this particular program where actually they're more concerned about landing shots as opposed to receiving them. What's your thoughts on that?
3 years ago, I found it really hard to spar other women. I really enjoyed sparring men because I feel like I can just beat them up. And to be honest, I feel like I wasn't really hurting them. Now that we're in this program, I think there's just a level of maturity where because I'm willing to be hit, I respect and assume that the other person is participating under the same mutually agreed upon choice. We're both stepping in. And actually, the highest form of respect that I can pay you is properly giving you a match. Queen to queen.
Queen to queen.
I assume you've done your training. I've done mine. Let's get on with it.
That's it. And that's the most empowering form is exactly that, honoring the person in front of you in the ring, that I trust that you've done your training so I can trust myself to do a good job as well. And so how do you see your boxing career following after this? You're like a Rottweiler. Are you surprised? You surprised me. This is what I mean. So from that experience, you surprised me in terms of just exactly that. Given the space and tools, it's like a rocket. And that's why I feel, especially when I'm training women, you know, when it comes to boxing as well, given the space, tools, and safety to exist in a way that where they feel comfortable and nurtured and nourished, there's like it's
infinite potential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really observing. And I observe that with you in many different areas of your life, from, you know, music to your speaking. So there's so many things in this context that I've definitely observed that as well with other women, but it especially with you as well.
I appreciate that. But I have learned that when I give the fullness of my human attention to something, it blossoms. And so when I think about boxing, it's my focus right now. Boxing has my full attention. Therefore, boxing is succeeding. When I don't give boxing my full attention, not succeeding. It's very straightforward. And so I preserve and I intentionally give my love and attention to the very thing that I'm choosing to, and I watch it grow. That's interesting to me. That's motivating. That's like our human magicianship at play and at practice. And so, like anything, when I neglect something, the plant needs watering. But when I give it sunny energy, love, speak to it, water, flowers, fruits, finest, tall, miracles. So this is how I think about my boxing right now.
Beautiful. Madame Gandhi, thank you so much for your words of wisdom, vulnerability, your intimate shares and your triumphs over trauma. Thank you so much for being on Fight Forward.